Hey everybody, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Beekeeping for Newbies. Thank you so very much for taking the time to listen. I do appreciate you. And as always, feel free to reach out, Jeff at beekeepingfornewbies.com. That's NEWBEES.com. All right, folks, we are at episode 134 today. The real cost of beekeeping, what they don't tell you. So I thought years ago that when I started beekeeping, I thought this would just be a cool, fun little project. Maybe you spend a few $100s, no big deal. And I think the closest thing that I can equate it to, if you've ever talked to somebody who's a boater, there's a couple of boater sayings. One of them is a boat is a hole in the water that you throw money into. That's one of them. And then the other one is a boat owner's two best and happiest days are the day they get their boat and the day they sell their boat. Now, I guess that kind of depends on your boating experience. But the point that I'm getting at is I really did not think beekeeping was going to be that expensive when I first started. I, again, thought maybe a few $100s or whatever. But what I wanted to do is there's a couple of different subjects that are very similar here that we talk about as it relates to price and cost and a lot of common questions. And this is one of the more common questions where people will say, like, hey, I'm thinking about getting into the hobby. Can you give me some advice? I don't really know how much of this or that I need. So what I'm going to try to do today is I'm going to run through the full list. Now, I did a video version of this today, and recognizing that the average attention span for a person on YouTube is about 8 seconds, it's much more abbreviated. So this is going to be, probably like 8 or 10 times as long as that one and give you all the full details and the full rundown. But like I said, if you want to check out youtube.com/@beekeepingfornewbies, you can catch a glimpse of that video over there. I also did a completely unrelated video today. I just got done recording it and uploaded it. I had these thoughts this morning. I got up and I was thinking about my mom, and I was thinking about like the last couple years of her life, and something kind of came to mind, and it's in the video. Check it out if you'd like to. I don't want to derail this whole discussion, but anyway, I can tell you that if you have the mindset that, and I've said this one again many times before, if you're like, hey, I really want to do beekeeping because I want to get honey, please just stop now, right? If honey is your big driver, really, honest to God, and I'm not trying to be mean or anything, just go to the farmer's market, find a local, reputable, honey seller, retailer, apiary, farmer's market, whatever you can do, find a place that sells good quality, raw honey, and just buy it from them. It'll be so much cheaper. Now, if you're into it for the experience, then we can kind of continue on. But a lot of times, if you go and you look and you say, okay, well, I looked online and there's a lot of parts and pieces. I'm not sure which of those parts and pieces I need, but I did some rough math and it's about $500. Now, your way of doing rough math is probably different from mine, because most normal people can do basic math and they come up with something that's going to be relatively close. I, while thinking I know math really well, have a tendency of being like, oh yeah, it's only going to be like $500, and it ends up being $2,000. So that's a fun little thing I get to live with. But I'm going to walk you through right now. And on the website, if you go to beekeepingfornewbies.com, there is a downloads link at the very top. You might have to go to more. Let me see. No, it's right there at the top. Go to downloads, and there's a few different things you can download from that page. There's some swarm trap plans. There's a posting of a recent letter about some of the honeybee losses. We have 5-frame nuke plans on there. But today, specifically, the one that I'm talking about is the last one on the list. And it's labeled first year beekeeping startup costs. Now, it's probably not going to be all inclusive, but it'll give you kind of a rough idea of what to expect. So we're going to do a quick review of some terminology that is, something we've talked about many times early on episodes, 1 through 20, 1 through 30, whatever it might be. But just a quick review in case you're jumping in a little bit late, or you may have been, looking around. This is your first season. You found the podcast and you're like, oh, I wonder what episode 134 is. We're going to be talking about things you probably don't know already. Might be good to go back and re-listen to some of the earlier episodes. But that being said, I'm going to go ahead and talk through a couple of different parts right now. So the boxes, right? Now we're going to be talking about what they call a Langstroth hive. It's a very standard kind of, I would say an industry standard kind of air quotes around that. of hive that a lot of people use. It's very simple. It's easy for new people, new beekeepers to kind of get a handle on, and it's ubiquitous. A nice fun word they used to say in technology all the time, but it's all over the place. Everywhere you go, you can find Langstroth hives. The boxes that you get and the way that you configure the boxes is something that you can control. Some people will do a single deep box as what they call a brood chamber. That's where all the brood frames will be, the brood box. In fact, the next episode, 135, is a single deep brood box versus a double deep brood box, talking about pros and cons. But in this episode, we're not going to dive that deep. You're going to have big boxes called deeps. You're going to have slightly smaller ones that are in the middle of the three options called medium. How about that? And then the smallest of the three options of box sizes are shallows. Now, my personal recommendation would be to do one of three things. Either do a single deep brood chamber, a double deep brood chamber, or just use all mediums for everything. Those would kind of be my three very generic options, but we're going to go ahead and start talking about just costs. But let's dive in and start talking about some numbers. Now, my recommendation here is to buy bees in a pair. Get your first bees in a pair. And there's a couple of reasons why I like to do this or suggest this. If you have two hives that are side by side and you go out and you're just observing them, right? You're not doing any inspections, nothing fancy is going on here, nothing out of the ordinary. You just walk out and take a look at them. You can make a comparison of those hives just from what you visually observe. So, you don't have to be a professional beekeeper. You don't have to have any background or knowledge. You can just walk up, look at them and say, wow, there's a whole lot of bees coming in and out of that one. And there's not nearly as many coming out of the other ones. That's really good information, right? That's really useful information. If you go out and you have a single hive and you see bees coming in and out, you're like, okay, well, cool. Bees are coming in and out. I guess everything is okay. Well, maybe not, right? Now, just because you have two hives there and one's more active than the other doesn't necessarily mean that the more active one is okay. I mean, theoretically, they could be getting robbed out, right? And robbing is another, behavior that is where bees are stealing from other bees, basically, or it could be other flying insects stealing from bees, wasps, hornets, yellow jackets, could be anything. But having something to compare to is always nice. It's also a benefit when you can go into a colony, you're doing an inspection, and you say, oh, geez, I'm having a problem. I don't see my queen. There's no eggs, there's no larva. This is a spring ramp up busy time of year where there should be a queen in here. Gosh, what am I going to do? You can go to an adjacent colony and take a frame that has young larvae, eggs and young larvae on it, and give that, or even cut a piece of that out and give that to the hive that doesn't have a queen and allow them to make a queen, right? Which is a separate subject we've talked about and we will continue to talk about more as the season goes on. But that's another great example as to why I recommend starting with two hives. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a quick spoiler right now up front about what these numbers come out to, and then we're going to break it down, individually. I have it set up as about $1,575. Now, these are year one costs, right? There are some things in here that you're buying in year one that you'll never have to buy again. I don't want to say that. I was going to say like a hive tool, for example. Like once you have a good hive tool, it'll last a long time. But one, I kind of beat the crap out of my stuff. And two, I lose them. They're all over the place. I literally have... I went out in my garage yesterday, was looking for something unrelated. I found 3 hive tools. I was in my truck looking for something for the excavator. There were 4 of them in my truck. I went to the back box of my truck to get a hydraulic line, a hydraulic hose for the excavator that I'm selling. I went to get that hydraulic hose out of there, found 2 more. I have literally 10 hive tools that are just around, and I knew of like 2 of them. Anyway, having extras is always a great thing, and you may have a situation where at some point you're going to help somebody else in another bee yard, and it's always great to kind of minimize cross contamination. So if you have one that's just brand new and it's in your truck, for example, or you have a separate kit that and again, I know I'm going off on a tangent here. It's what I love to do, but having some separate hardware that you can use as an emergency fallback for yourself, but also to use for other people's apiaries is good. Like for me, I know for a fact I've got 3 or 4 of them in my garage in one area that are brand new. I've never used them. So if someone called me and said, hey, can you give me a hand? I'm really in a bind. I'm going to grab some of that new stuff just to minimize any kind of cross-contamination or whatever. Not a huge issue for good, healthy colonies, but not a bad practice either. But some of these costs are initial costs, like, the smoker and some of these other things that we're gonna talk about right now. But so one single hive, $1,575, $1,950 for two. Let's break this down. So the Langstroth hive by itself, is about $200. So if you're starting with two colonies, you're looking at $400. Now, the bees, the way that you get your bees, if you look at the last episode of 133, we talked about package bees versus nucleus colonies. Those are going to be your two primary options for obtaining bees through a traditional method, through what would hopefully be a reputable dealer or, reputable apiary. The other option is swarm traps. And, again, this is something that's become more and more popular. Bees swarm every spring. If you put out a swarm trap, and I've got a video on YouTube, just go look on the YouTube channel at Beekeeping for Newbies. There is a video in there on how to make a swarm trap. I am putting mine out within the next 2 weeks, and I will take videos of that. I'm going to have 1 to 2 at my house and probably like 3 of them down at my property. And I'll just do a consolidated video that has all of them on there so you guys can see exactly how I'm doing it and what I'm doing. And I might even be able to get the fee beekeeper to come along with me. I talked to her yesterday and she said she might be able to help out with that. So it'd be kind of cool to have her helping. But it is definitely not too late. In fact, my Swarm Commander, which is the spray I use as an attractant, that I just ordered that. It'll be here tomorrow. And if you wanted to go right now, go to your local hardware store, buy a couple of pieces of I recommend, I'm using like the 23/30 seconds OSB. So it's just shy of 3/4 of an inch thick. And people say, oh, OSB, man, it's not going to last as long. That's true. It doesn't last as long as regular plywood. But if you paint it, which I still have not done, but if you paint it and you're putting it out for 3 months out of the year, it's going to probably last you 5 or 10 years, right? You're not leaving them out full time year round. You're going to put them out. For me, where I am, I'm putting them out March 15th. I'll probably have my first swarm in there by the 1st of April. If I do it right, I can run like 2 to 3 week rotations on them, and I could get, 1 to 3 swarms per swarm trap. If I have a good season, I could get quite a few. So getting them out there, and like I said, you can, it was $23 or $24 for a sheet of that OSB. And then I have these little metal dials that you can spin around at the front to open or close the entrance. So it's wide open. It has a queen excluder entrance, and then it has a fully closed option that's vented. So those are about $1 a piece. So when you do the math on that, it comes out to be, I think we did it. It was like $6 or $7 per swarm trap to do those yourself. The Swarm Commander was about $35 for the container. That'll last me all season, probably into next year as well. It'll probably last me 2 seasons. So when you do that math across catching, say, 10 or 12 swarms, $3 per swarm? So for about $10 per colony, you can do some swarm trapping, and I think that's a great way to get yourself started. Now, we're going to do another, I've done it once before in the past, but we're going to do another episode on that here probably in about 2 or 3 weeks. In fact, I'm going to make a note of it right now while I'm thinking about it. Okay, I just made a quick note to do another follow-on episode about swarm trapping and some of the things you need to do afterwards to make sure that you're looking out for your health, the health of those bees, the health of your existing apiary and all that. So we will talk about that. But back to the real point at hand, as you have seen, I've managed to go off on about 6 different tangents. We're talking about the acquisition of your first bees. And like, again, the last episode talked about package bees versus nukes. So if a package of bees is probably going to be, if you go and pick one up at an apiary, it's probably going to cost you about $125 to $150, somewhere in there. And then the other option being a nucleus colony, which is just kind of a miniature colony. That's going to put you somewhere between $150 and $250, kind of depending on where you go. So we'll just say roughly about $350 worth of bees. Now, the next thing is protective gear. My recommendation has always been, as a brand new beekeeper, I would really prefer you to be covered head to toe. There are a lot of people out there that I would like to, how do I say this? I don't want to get flagged for aggressive, angry behavior. I get upset when people give people bad advice and bully them over stupid things that don't matter. I've seen a lot of people out there like, well, you have to be able to have no gear on if you want to pass this bee inspection to get our apprentice or our journeyman or whatever. They act like, for some reason, like wearing protective gear is a bad thing. There's a lot of great examples I can think about this where being protected makes a lot of sense, but I'm going to kind of keep this PG and keep it a family-friendly discussion today. But I don't understand why people bully people. If you want to wear gloves and that's what you like to do and that's what makes you comfortable, then do that. If you want to be covered head to toe all year long, right? April through October, whatever it is, then do that. Right. The people that out there go, well, real beekeepers don't do that. Shut up. Right. Just stop. So get your full gear and be covered head to toe, because what you're doing as a beekeeper is it's important to gain confidence. You're gaining skills, you're gaining confidence. Once you have the skills, you have the confidence, and you know what you're doing, you're going to become much more relaxed. Now, there are people that would argue, right? I'm not going to get into a pheromonal argument and discussion, but that when you show up and you're anxious and you're stressed out, that the pheromones you're putting off, the bees detect that as aggression and they're going to be more aggressive towards you. I'm not an entomologist. I'm not a scientist in that capacity. So I'm not going to say that that's right or wrong. But I think if you go into it with this apprehension and you think, oh, I'm going to get stung, and you're nervous and you're anxious about it, you're not going to have fun. So focus on protecting yourself. Get the head to toe gear, right? So full suit that has an integrated veil with it and some gloves. And make sure that you're wearing, I recommend just some kind of like maybe a hiking boot, or what they call mucklucks, or just some kind of, like a thicker boot, something that gives you protection, because I have been stung around the ankles. And so for me, when I get stung down like in the bottom of my feet, like near the ankles or lower feet, my feet will swell up. Like I still swell up in a way that is not great. I don't know. I mean, I force myself, like I make sure that I get stung multiple times, every year. But for whatever reason, when I get stung by my legs, they swell up and I got to wear sandals, which I'm kind of, all spring and summer, I'm barefoot in sandals anyway. But if I tried to put on a dress shoe or something, it wouldn't happen. Anyway, protect your feet as well, because if there's a crack that the bees can get into, if they're angry with you, they will find that. Okay, we talked about hive tools already. You got to have a hive tool. You got to get a smoker. There are some people that are going to argue that the smoker is the most important tool that you can get as a beekeeper. I respectfully disagree with that. I can put on bee gear and I can do an inspection without a smoker. If I have a very gentle hive, I can go in there with no smoke and no gear. Now, I'm probably not going to tear things down. If it's a really large, double deep, huge configuration, I'm probably not going to break it all the way down with no gear on. But you can definitely go in and pull a couple frames and take a look without specific gear, without a smoker. You show up without a hive tool, good luck, right? If they have propolized all of those frames against the hive bodies, you're not going to get them out. And even if you do, they're going to be pretty angry and upset with you. So the smoker is an important tool. I just don't put it in the category of the most important tool. I put it, smoker and hive tool together, you got to have. They are both must-have tools. I allocated $200 for protective gear. Now you can buy a full suit, bodysuit, whatever, for $200 by itself. You can buy a cheaper one for probably $100, $120. Here is what I could tell you to do if you had unlimited supply of money and can do whatever you wanted. Here's what I like. I like just a veil. A veil is great. You always want to protect your face, because getting stung, like I saw an eye sting once. Oh my golly, that's insane. An actual like eyeball sting. You don't want that. No eyeball stings. I've been stung around my face, and I've had a picture of me. Like I had a cat that had an injury, and its eye was swollen up, and I got stung above my eye. So like I have a picture of me holding the cat, and both of us have a goofy right eye. But like you don't want to be stung in the face, the eyes, and like that's just no good. So protect your face. But then you have the option that's just the jacket with the integrated veil. That's great. You can wear a pair of jeans, something comfortable, and do that. And then of course there's the full body suit. Now I have this other one that's just a really lightweight. It's just a real thin white. I think it was $18, $20 on Amazon. They're not going to protect you. Like you will get stung through them, but it provides a little bit of a barrier. But most importantly, it's really lightweight. It's good for hot summer days, and you can just throw it in the truck or whatever. I've got one in my truck. I've got one in my shipping container. I've got one in the garage. They're just easy to work with, and they're cheap. But if nothing else, you'll have some options to think about, and you can change and progress over the years and continue to make investments in that space. But I allocated $200 for that, $100 for the bee tools we just talked about. Now, feeds and sugar. At some point, you are probably going to need to feed your bees. If you have a package of bees in the spring, I always recommend feeding them. If you don't get a good fall flow, or you didn't have a great summer flow, if you're in one of those areas that has a pretty consistent flow and you didn't get a great flow, you may need to feed. If you're in an area that doesn't naturally support honeybees, right? A lot of people just think, I want bees, so they have to do well here. Not necessarily. Bees may not be designed to do well where you are. So you may be stuck feeding them. I have this set as not including the feeder, just for the feed itself, about $100 per season. If you get to a point where you're buying 25-pound bags of sugar at whatever they are today, it's $10, $12, $15 a piece. I don't even know. The pricing on everything is just so weird. But let's say you're spending $100 per season there. You also have to buy the feeders. You have options for top feeders, frame feeders, jar feeders on top, jar feeders inside. I don't recommend entrance feeders, but buying the feeders that you're going to use however you decide to use them, I'm allocating about $100 a year for the feed itself, and then maybe you allocate $25 or $50 a year to buying different types of feeders. If you want to do an open feeder using a 5-gallon jug, check out the YouTube channel. We do have a video there on how to make that. Okay, now talking about some kind of ongoing maintenance costs here. Every year, you're probably going to be doing a little bit of painting. So we'll say maybe about $15 a year, something like that, to buy a little bit of paint. And then you have all your frames and foundation, right? You're going to have to, as you add honey supers, you have to add a honey super is the equivalent of another box, right? It is just a honey box. So when we talked about the deeps, mediums, and shallows earlier, you can use any of those as a honey super, but they will get pretty heavy. So my recommendation would be to use a medium or shallows for your honey boxes. But whenever you buy a box and you buy frames, that price will build up. If you buy them for $4 a piece, 50 frames, per hive, that's $200 in frames alone. And you're probably going to be replacing those maybe every 4 years or so. You have, so we mentioned the paint and then seasonal treatments, right? I have this as, because the number one most important thing that every beekeeper has to have a plan for is, what is your varroa mite treatment strategy? Now, I have this set as $100 a year. Now, you can get away with that. You can absolutely do treatments on 2 hives for $100 a year. You're probably not going to be able to do all of them. It depends on the method that you choose. For example, I have an oxalic acid vaporizer, and it cost me, like 10 or 12 cents per treatment. But the vaporizer was $500, right? So if you're going to buy Apivar, Apiguard, HopGuard, Formic Pro, any kind of formic acid, Thymol, all these other options you have, they get pricey. And that $100 can really quickly become $300 or $400 because you may end up doing 4, 5, 6 treatments a year, depending on what's going on. If there is resistance within the treatments that you're using, if there's some kind of issue with efficacy. So that is a big variable that you have to plan for. You absolutely positively have to have a budget and plan for how you're going to handle varroa mites, or your bees 100% will die. And I got an email recently from a really nice person. I think they were up in North Dakota, if memory serves me correctly. And I'm really excited for the bee journey that he's about to undertake. And I think if I remember correctly, I think they have some fruit trees and other things going. And he says, I want to go all natural. And I really love that. I really, really love the idea of not using chemicals and letting whatever it might be, whether it's through, traditional agriculture or, agriculture, horticulture, whatever kind of culture. If you are not using chemicals, I'm a huge, huge fan, except for honeybees. If you don't treat your honeybees, they will die, and they will make other bees in the area sick, and they will make it harder for other beekeepers in your area to keep the mite numbers down. It is so serious, and I really, really wish that I could. There's no way to convey this. It's one of those things where, I had to learn the hard way. I heard people saying, make sure you treat, and I was like, yeah, whatever, not going to happen to me. Bees died. And they're going to die, and you're going to get all excited. You'd be like, yeah, my bees made it, no problem at all. Because you don't really know all the diseases to look for. You don't know the signs and symptoms to look for. You don't really know what's wrong. They made it through the winter. Wow, cool. Yeah, my bees must be resistant. And then they die that next spring or summer, right? I'm telling you, they might be able to get away with it for a season, because you're brand new in your area. There's not a lot of bees there, whatever the case might be, but those mites are going to find your bees. Now, I have over here what I call an emergency cost. If you, and this is just where I blocked out $300, right? If you lose a colony, you need to get some equipment. Quite often people will go into, for example, year 2, and they've made the big investments in year 1. They go into year 2 and they're not even planning for the fact they're probably going to need to split 1 or 2 of their colonies, or they're going to need to find a way to do some swarm management. So I have a generic $300 in here for emergency replacement of things. So what you could do is you could say, okay, instead of 14, whatever it was I said at the beginning, 1,400 and 1,900, you could say maybe 1,100 and 1,600. Right, you can knock that off if you're not planning for any emergencies or you're not planning for things that could go wrong. Now, there are a couple of little, hidden costs that I want to just bring up. They may not be applicable to everybody, but just kind of as a thought to keep in mind. Some places do require like a licensing or a registration of the hives with the local government or other entities. So if you have to, get like a permit or some kind of permission, you may need to pay money in that case. If you want to extract honey, that's a whole separate ball game, right? Honey extraction and bottling. So you're looking at bottles or jars and extraction equipment and all of that. I'm not even getting into that, right? That's one of those things where it's like you can spend thousands, tens of thousands of dollars, buying all that extraction equipment. You can get for $100, $150, you can get enough stuff to do some extraction on your own around the house, right? You can get a decapping tool, a filter, a couple different media filters, food grade buckets, put a honey gate on it or get one with a honey gate, open it up, filter, and you've got honey, right? You can do it really cheaply. It's just going to be a little messy and maybe not as efficient. But anyway, I was talking about kind of some licensing fees. You may have some storage costs. Sometimes you don't have, maybe if you're in an urban setting or even if you're in a suburban area, but maybe you're in an apartment or you don't really have a lot of spare space, you may have to, have a storage area or someplace that you need to rent some storage. If you are in an area where you are living in one place but keeping bees somewhere else, you're going back and forth, driving, so you have some expenses in that space. If you're in a bee club, you might be looking at somewhere between $15 and maybe $50 a year, depending on where you are, to be a member of the bee club. There's bee conferences. I think in Virginia, the Virginia State Beekeepers Association, I think it's around $150 twice a year if you want to do the spring and their fall little like 2-day conference. And it's a great opportunity. It's money well spent. I mean, you're going to have fun. You'll meet a lot of beekeepers and there's usually vendors there and you can ask a lot of questions and there's good education and some hands-on workshops. I mean, it's well worth the time, but it is another expense. Now, if you want to get really fancy down the road, you can always get into like hive monitoring and sensors and scales and do some weighing, and you can buy nuke boxes, right? Having nuke boxes around are great for catching swarms, doing splits, selling them to other people if you wanted to. Having the folding ones are great, just in case of an emergency. They take up very little space. You can just grab one out, fold it into place, go somewhere, catch a swarm, throw some frames in. So there's a lot of things that you can keep spending money on. There is a massive, and this is an area you want to pay attention to. There is a massive amount of stuff out there you can buy that so many people will tell you, you got to have this, you got to have that, you got to do this, you got to do this. And I'm going to say that probably better than like 70 or 80% of it is crap. A lot of it is stuff that you don't need. Whenever you're wondering, like, gosh, do I really need this? Walk outside, look at a tree. Find a nice big old oak tree in your yard or at the park or wherever you can see a tree. Look at that and go, what does that have? Right? When you're talking about, I need to have insulation in my hive. Okay, well, let's talk about that. How thick are the walls of the tree? When the tree is hollowed out, how thick are the tree's walls? How thick is it above the hole or the cavity in the tree? How thick is it below the cavity? Okay, well, it sounds like some of the tree above is alive, maybe, or at least there's solid tree. Some of it below is solid. So maybe the sides aren't very insulated, but the top and bottom are. Okay, heat rises. Maybe I need to insulate the top. Oh, wait, there's no screened bottom board in the tree, right? I like screened bottom boards. I think they're cool. I think they add a little bit of ventilation. I think the bees probably like them. Is it necessary? Nope, not at all. I guess maybe if you're keeping bees in the Sahara or you're in some desert and it hits 120 during the day, the bees are happier to have a little bit more airflow coming up from underneath. I don't know, put them in the shade. dig down into the ground a little bit, get them a little bit lower where it's cooler. I don't know. But there are so many gimmicks and just crap in beekeeping that you don't need. So just whenever you're thinking about, oh, wow, I really need to look at this new super cool thing, look at the tree. What does the tree have, right? You don't need to have 15 entrances. You don't need to have, you don't need to drill 15 holes in the side of the tree for ventilation. There's a whole bunch of things that people are going to tell you got to do that you don't necessarily have to do. And I'm going to keep rambling all day long, so I got to cut myself off. So folks, go to beekeepingfornewbies.com. It's NEWBEES.com. You got all the documents you can download in the download section that we just talked about with the swarm trap plans, nuke plans, the rough, budgeting numbers over there. The website also has some other information about our Master Beekeeper program that we're working on right now. The apprentice program is rolling out here. It's either going to be somewhere between the 1st of April, 1st of May timeframe. That's going really well, whole separate discussion. And again, check us out on YouTube. It's just at Beekeeping for Newbies, youtube.com/at Beekeeping for Newbies. We're putting some things out. I did a video today on this subject, much briefer. I did a completely unrelated video about some other stuff. And of course, you can always join the Discord room. The link for that is on the homepage. So you can join us over there. This is the time of year where it starts to really ramp up. We got a lot more chatter and people talking. I think we're almost around 400 members over there. So jump in, chat with us, ask questions. If I'm at the laptop and I'm doing work inside and I'm working on podcast and video and other things, I have the laptop open all the time and I'm responding, whenever I'm awake and I got the laptop open. So feel free to jump in there, ask me questions, ask other people questions. But all that being said, I've got to get back to work. I got other things I got to put out for you folks. So take care, be kind to one another, and remember that I love you. There's nothing you can do about it. We'll talk to you soon.